Good morning, first hour. Here's your host, Rana Burgundy. Champagne kind. Briquette Tamland. And Brianna Fantana.
Hello, I'm Rana Burgundy, and you're watching a special edition of Channel 4 News. Tonight, we will be reviewing The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, a really terrible novel. Terrible, yet terrible novel. So, about the title of this novel. The Invisible Man is rightfully named so because the narrator himself becomes invisible. The novel documents the narrator's descent from a real man to a nobody, from living at the top of the social life to living in a hole in the sewers.
Thanks, Rana. Now, I know I usually talk about the weather, and it is just so beautiful out here today. But today I'm going to talk about the author of The Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison. Now, here are some facts about him. Here we have our author, Ralph Waldo Ellison. Ellison was born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma on March 1st, 1913. Here we see a picture of Oklahoma City in the 1950s. Ellison was named after Ralph Waldo Emerson, who we see here. Ralph's parents were named Louis and Ida. His father Louis died when Ralph was only 3 in a work-related incident. His mother Ida then had to continue to raise Ralph and his older brother Herbert as a single parent. Ellison excelled in school and was taken up by the trumpet at age 8. He studied music at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. He spent 3 years here at Tuskegee and then made his way to New York. In these pictures, we see the campus and a classroom at Tuskegee. In 1937, he was persuaded by a friend, Richard Wright, to publish his first book review and short story. And then later, in 1938, he married his first wife, Rose Pendexter, who was an actress at the time. They got a divorce not long after, in 1945. Then, in 1946, he married his second wife, a woman of the name Fanny McConnell, and remained with her for the rest of his life. After working on The Invisible Man for 7 years, Ellison finally published it in 1952 with the support of his second wife Fanny and a grant from the Rosenwald Foundation. The Invisible Man won the National Book Award in 1953 and was also named on the list of 100 Best Novels by Time magazine. The Invisible Man was the peak of Ellison's career. After The Invisible Man, however, Ellison spent the rest of his life working on his second novel, which was sadly cut short when he died on April 16, 1994, at the age of 81 of pancreatic cancer in New York City. When he died, he left behind 1,600 pages of an unfinished manuscript, which would later be published as Juneteenth. Ellison's legacy continues through his stories and a biography that was written by Arnold Rampersad. Now, isn't Ralph Ellison such an interesting man? Well, back to you, Rana.
Woo! Thanks, Briquette. Now, for our sports announcer, Champagne Kind, to tell us about the setting. Marcus! I need my drink!
Alright, thank you, Rana. So the setting of this book, it begins in the South, and then as our narrator moves, it goes to New York in the borough of Harlem, and it is set in the 1930s. And all three of these are important because this is when racial issues were prominent. And back to you, Rana.
Thanks, Champagne. Now, after a short commercial break, me and my co-star Brienne will talk about the banned content of this novel. 3, 2, 1 was banned. No, that's not how I'm gonna start.
Guys, stop. Stop.
Come into that chair.
The novel be banned because there is no. I don't know. However, no.
32.
Now here I am with Brienne Fantana to discuss why this novel was banned. When this novel was first published in 1952, it was very scandalous and outrageous. However, it was not actually banned until 2013. Now, Brienne, why was this novel banned?
It was banned by the school board of Randolph County, North Carolina, in a 5-2 favor of getting rid of it due to explicit content and lack of literary value.
Thank you. Now, here are some examples of the explicit content of this novel. Now I will read aloud some examples of the objectionable material. I was the irresponsible one, for I should have used my knife to protect the higher interests of society. At first, this quote seems innocent. However, after looking into the underlying context, the reader realizes that the narrator is talking about how he should have murdered someone because he was walking too slowly on the sidewalk. Definitely not a good thing. Another example of the objectionable material. I had to be careful, though, not to speak too much like a northern N-word. They wouldn't like that. The thing to do, I thought with a smile, was to give them hints that whatever you did or said was weighted with a broad and mysterious meanings that lay just beneath the surface. They'd love that. Now, this example shows how the narrator was great at stereotyping white men and that there was still racism in the 1930s in the United States. Now our final example. So why not entertain her? Be a gentleman. Or whatever it is she thinks you are. What does she think you are? A domesticated rapist, obviously. An expert on the woman question. Maybe that is what you are. Housebroken, and with a convenient verbal push-button arrangement for the lady's pleasure. Well, so I had set this trap for myself. This, if you hadn't gotten the idea, is the narrator talking about how a white woman is asking him to play a rapist in her rape fantasy because her home life is not interesting enough. If the taboo thought of rape is not objectionable enough in the 50s, it certainly is now. Brienne Fantana for characterization.
Thanks, Rana. Now about the main character. There's really only one in this novel, and that is the narrator. In the beginning of the story, he is very naive and tries to do everything that is right, but as the story goes on, you start to see him change and realize that things aren't always as they seem. Back to you, Rana.
Thanks, Brienne. Now to Champagne for a summary of the novel.
Alright, thanks again, Rana. So in this book, a young black man attending college in the South gets expelled and moves to Harlem. There, he searches for a job and ends up working for a communist party called the Brotherhood. While working for this organization, he slowly faces the truth about racism and his lack of identity. Racial tensions continue to build in Harlem, and a riot breaks out, driving the narrator into a literal manhole. In the darkness and solitude, he begins to understand himself and decides to write his story down, hence the bulk of the novel.
Now, here to discuss whether or not we agree with the ban are my co-stars, Brienne, Champagne, and Briquette. Brienne, would you start us off?
Sure. I do agree with the ban on the book because of some of the details described in it, which brings me to my next point of believing that there should be an age minimum on reading it due to the explicit content.
Thank you. Well, I do agree there is explicit content. I feel that the ban should be lifted, as the basis of this ban was that there is no literary value. I feel after reading the novel that there is literary value.
Yes, I agree with you, Rana. I disagree with the ban because I personally think that the issues the narrator faces demonstrates the hardships African Americans went through in the 1930s.
See, I agree more with Brienne. I think that this was a good idea to ban this book from being in schools. I don't think students should read this. It has a lot of racy stuff. It has
Incest.
a lot of incest, and It's not a good story for high school students to read. I don't think it should be in high schools, and I definitely agree with the ban.
Well, thank you guys for your inputs. Stay classy, First Tower.